computer. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos en otro Conversando Concisos. Mi nombre es Edgar Rojas, dando la bienvenida desde acá de Estados Unidos, y nuestro colega Andrés Almanza desde Bogotá. Andrés, ¿cómo te va?
Muy bien, Edgar. Buenas tardes a todos ustedes. Bueno, aquí estamos con una tarde medio soleada, pero sabemos que va a llover,
Ah, pues
entonces todo
madre.
bien. Sí, en Bogotá
Bueno,
está lloviendo muchísimo, pero bueno, aquí vamos.
antes de comenzar, la invitación es a todos. Se aproxima el CISO Latam Summit, 7 de octubre en Santa Marta, en el Marriott Resort Playa Dormida. Andrés, el tema del COVID en Colombia ya está disminuyendo la cosita, está
Sí,
mucho
sí,
mejor.
nosotros estamos ahorita muy bien en términos
Exacto,
de números.
muy bien,
Nos está acompañando que, bueno, estamos avanzando como deberíamos. Entonces, pues
perfecto.
bueno, eso
Y
buenísimo.
eso, y eso nos ayuda a todos para que estemos más
Claro,
tranquilos y
claro.
estemos ahí. Seguimos, pues, vamos a estar siempre, pues, siguiendo los protocolos de bioseguridad, que como indica todas las regulaciones y todo. Pero va a ser un evento muy, muy bueno. Ahí tenemos a la gente de Forge Rock, tenemos a gente de Beyond Trust, de Exabeam, Sonic Wall, nuestros amigos de Fluid Attacks. Y bueno, va a
Que
ser
eso me pareció muy chévere porque pues creo que es tu primera vez que tienes un local,
local,
¿no?
local, exacto, exacto,
Sí,
sí.
eso, o sea, yo la verdad se lo dije a Felipe, que lo
Sí,
conozco, que
no,
me
es
parecía
espectacular.
espectacular
Sí, muy
que un
bueno
local
ellos
tomara esa decisión,
de estar con
porque pues eso
nosotros.
también es importante. Eso me
Exacto.
parece súper chévere, súper chévere.
Entonces, Andrés, a lo que vinimos. La semana pasada o las últimas 3 semanas hemos estado hablando acerca de ransomware. La semana pasada tuvimos un panel de lujo, pero de lujo. Expertos que habían estado en el panel de ransomware de DEFCON 29 y nos
Ujú.
acompañaron la semana pasada. Si no han visto ese video, entren a la página de tacticaledge.co, el área de Conversando Concisos, y ahí está el video de la semana pasada. Y uno de los invitados en ese programa era Kurtis Minder, el CEO de Groupsense, quien nos acompañó y nos habló acerca de lo que él hacía, y nos comentó que él era un negociador de ransomware, y a nosotros nos pareció impresionante porque yo personalmente nunca había escuchado que había, que ese bicho existía, ¿no? El
Sí, claro,
Ransomware
no.
Negotiator. Y me comuniqué con él después de la reunión durante la semana, y pues lo invité a que nos acompañara en para este episodio, para hablar específicamente acerca de las víctimas, porque conocemos el tema del ransomware, pero yo nunca he sabido, nunca he escuchado qué sucede con la víctima, cuál es el proceso dentro de la organización que ha sido víctima de un ransomware, qué es lo que hacen, cómo lo hacen, cómo reaccionan. Entonces, con Curtis nos reunimos el lunes y hicimos la grabación que vamos a compartir con ustedes, una grabación de 40 minutos. La idea es, nosotros seguimos aquí por el chat, por el QA. Andrés y yo seguimos pendientes mientras compartimos la grabación, y terminamos la grabación y regresamos aquí en vivo y tenemos una discusión de unos 10-15 minutos adicionales. Andrés, ¿te parece?
Sí, perfecto.
Listo, entonces a todos de verdad muchas gracias por estar con nosotros. De nuevo, QA y el chat están abiertos. Voy a compartir aquí la pantalla. Espérate, share sound, optimize for this. Y vamos a comenzar, y Andrés me dice si nos escuchas. All right, Curtis, so thank you so much. Really
Sí.
appreciate your time. We've been talking offline. You're extremely busy, so really appreciate that you had the time to come back and talk to us and continue the conversation from last week. I tell you what, last week I've been reading a lot of things on Twitter and on the internet about recommendations. What we were talking about with
Yeah.
with Liz and with Rob, and major companies. This is what we recommend you do to prevent a ransomware attack. And
Right.
then I'm like, okay, good. Let's read those 4 or 5 points, and it's the exact same things that we were saying, and patch. And all I get is Rob's comments. Okay, that's useless. Right. And by reading all that stuff, I realized that, the conversation with you as the you said that part of your role is as a ransomware negotiator.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I don't remember ever reading or hearing anyone tell us exactly what happens after a company it's a victim
Right.
of ransomware. So, so I appreciate that you accepted the invitation to come back
Sure.
and
Yeah,
follow
no,
us.
I appreciate the offer. Yeah, thanks for having me back.
No, great. So we have Kurtis Minder, correct? Not Minder.
Yep.
Kurtis Minder, CEO of Groupsense. So tell us about Groupsense. What do you guys offer there? What are your services?
Yep, sure. We're a digital risk protection company. Inside, we started in what we called cyber reconnaissance. What that really evolved into is a space now defined as digital risk protection services, which is, if I'm going to dumb it down, is basically monitoring for all of the attack indicators that the threat actors would use against you in an attack. Anything that left the building or the network that should not have, and is resident someplace that should not be. So that's things like stolen intellectual property, credentials, things like that. And a lot of the stuff gets traded on these underground marketplaces. Our job is to be present to detect it and to notify the affected parties when we detect their data being monetized, stolen, dumped, that sort of thing.
Great. And so that service is global in nature, even though you're based in the States, correct? But you offer your services
we're a global
internationally.
company. We actually have global offices.
Oh.
We have native language support for like 15 or 16 native languages in our analyst team.
Excellent.
And what we do, I think, that makes us different than a lot of players in the space is we're very hands-on. While we have a very complex technology stack that helps us analyze all this data, we also have a team of analysts that assist the clients in actioning the data. So for example, if we found someone who was purporting to have, a company's, one of our customers' data, we have embedded teams that will engage those threat actors in their native language. So sometimes that's Russian, Ukrainian, et cetera, and have a negotiation about that data and get some samples and things like that. So we get very, very involved in the outcomes related to the data we find.
Wow. Okay. So now we're talking about the negotiating aspects.
Yeah, so that's really how we ended up sort of fortuitously in the ransomware negotiation businesses. We do these conversations with threat actors underground all the time prior to the ransomware epidemic, and so we were sort of uniquely suited to be the ones talking to the bad guys. Wow. In the fact that we're a reconnaissance company to start with, we already have a bunch of sort of intelligence data about the threat actors that are perpetrating the attack. So we know who our opponent is, right? We know enough about them, and we understand their language, their culture. We understand the underground marketplaces that they participate in. So it puts us in a really strong position to have a conversation with them about a ransomware incident.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, and I'm pretty sure that it didn't start, like you said, it didn't start with that in mind. It's just like part of the, you've been at the right place at the right time, and there's a demand for ransomware negotiator. As I said last week, that's the first time I've ever heard of a ransomware negotiator, and it only makes sense, right? Because again, when we look at ransomware, the stages of ransomware, we always talk about how the company, the victim organization makes a decision if they're going to pay or not, but never did it come like you can negotiate to lower, reduce, or whatever. So explain to us what do you look to do as a ransomware negotiator? What is your number one goal there?
Yeah, and we talked about it last week, Edgar. The first step is really educating the victim on who they're dealing with, and all the data around that. So who are they? Is this particular threat actor group honorable? Are they going to honor the ransom if we pay it?
That's a big question, right? Because a lot of people are like, you're trusting criminals to be honest.
Yeah. And for the most part, our experience has been they do honor the ransoms. However, disclaimer, results may vary. These are bad guys in a foreign country with no accountability. So you have to keep that in mind. So we educate them on that, on their typical behavior, timeframes, how long it's going to take us to settle this. We educate them on the cryptocurrency purchase process and the risks around that. So basically educate the victim on all of the options on the table so that they can make the business decision on whether or not to pursue an engagement with the threat actor at all. If they decide to do that, then we become the liaison between the victim and the ransomware group or actor. That facilitates itself in a number of ways. One is we're going to come up with a strategy on the reducing of the ransom, which we've developed a number of strategies that have been fairly effective for us over the years. And we know which strategies work on which threat actor groups, et cetera. So we know which tools to apply. And then we engage in a 100% transparent process where we recommend the messaging that we're going to use. The client approves it. They can also edit it. So we may inform you that, hey, we don't think that edit's a good idea, and here's why. but we allow the client to be in the driver's seat through the whole process. 100% transparency. No message gets sent to the bad guy without approval from the client. And we do this all through a secure portal where everything's recorded, so you can see everything that's going on. The technical part of that is we have an analyst team who is actually logging into the darknet and actually typing the words again, like back and forth with the threat actor. And so there's an obfuscation layer between the client and the darknet side and all this other.
So that communication on the side, is that live communication as the conversation is being had with the client? It
depends on the threat actor group, the cadence. There's usually a pretty good delay between messages, which gives us time to go back and say, okay, we've said this, they've said that. Here's our next recommended message. Here's what we're trying to do with that, where we think that's going to take us. And so it gives us time to go back and forth. But yes, the chat that's happening with the threat actors happening in a live chat forum.
Wow, incredible.
And then the third part is, once we're getting close to the point where we think we're getting to a number that is reasonable for them, for the victim, we help with the cryptocurrency component, which is, we're paying these threat actors typically in Bitcoin, Ether, or Monero. And there's a process from getting the cash in your bank into a digital wallet and then paying the threat actors. And we've built sort of a layer of financial operational security infrastructure that obfuscates your bank from the bad guy's digital wallet, so that there's no direct connection, that sort of thing. And then all of this, of course, is documented, and a report is generated at the end that you can take back to your board or to your insurance company or your lawyers to review.
And then after that, so you have education, the liaison to negotiate the strategy. Then once that is agreed, then you help with the cryptocurrency, setting everything up, obfuscation, privacy, security, so that the bad guys don't know where the money is coming from, because you don't, although in theory they probably already know, but you don't want to make it easy for them. And after that is the actual payment.
And then there's the actual payment and validation of payment. And I glazed over one part. Most countries will have some international sort of sanctions for certain entities. So part of our process is also reviewing those international laws and making sure that we're not violating them by doing this transaction. In the United States, that's called OFAC, Office of Foreign Asset Control, where they say, like, for example, we can't transact with a company in Iran, for example. And we do international cases. So when we do those in LATAM or in Europe, we review those laws as well.
Okay. No, okay, that's fantastic, because that's one of the things that Liz said last week. Always refer to the local laws.
Yeah.
So then the actual payment and validation that the payment was made, and by validation also includes receiving the crypto keys and everything.
Yeah, and we usually negotiate for more than just the decryptor keys. So that's a given, right? We want the decryptor keys 100% of the time. But also keep in mind that the threat actors have typically exfiltrated a fair amount of corporate data. So we typically are asking them for confirmation of deletion, usually that's the video of them deleting the files. I recognize, I'll just say, disclaimer, I recognize that they could have another copy. We know that. But but you ask for it anyway. And then we also ask for them from the threat actors, typically a playbook on how they gained access.
Oh.
And they usually tell you. They usually tell you, and it's immensely valuable to the organization. And so we'll have a list of things that we're asking for in return for the payment. And most of the time we do get those things. Not 100%, but most of the time.
Okay, so that playbook, how they actually accomplished the attack and they were successful. That way, you guys the client can go ahead and patch all that stuff. How about, is it also part of like, you promise you're not going to hack us again and ransomware again? Because, right, they're going to leave stuff in their back door. So
right.
How does that get handled?
We have like a set things that we ask for, and those types of promises are part of that. But you got to take those with a grain of salt. I will say that we have not had a case where a client has been attacked twice by the same group. But
that's a big disclaimer.
Yeah, but we have had multiple cases where they have been attacked more than once by different groups, and sometimes, and very recently, twice in the same. Well, before we'd solved the first one, a second one hit them. So it's a little volatile. Yeah.
So how does that one work? So if the first one has your data and encrypted your data, how does the second come in and then
they came in and encrypted the other guy's encrypted data? They encrypted it.
Oh my!
Twice. Yeah. And so what I would say from lessons learned there is, in the beginning of a negotiation, one of the things, or an engagement with a victim, one of the things we try to gauge is the victim's confidence that they've locked the door, that they've shut the door. Like, can these guys still get in? And that's a traditional incident response sort of process. Okay. And this is the kind of thing that can happen if you have not done those things. Obviously, I have had threat actors claim and threaten that they still have access to the network as part of their negotiation, and threaten. Having some confidence that they're full of it, that they're lying, is a good tool to have. That's a lot of leverage for them to have if they can still get in. Yeah.
All right. So this 4 or 5 steps, what is the time frame usually from education all the way to verification that everything is back to normal?
It varies a lot based on the organization and the circumstances, because the one thing that's out of our control is the threat actor's responsiveness. So the threat actors may have multiple victims that they're servicing at a time, sometimes 30, 40 victims.
Okay.
So you're waiting in line for their attention sometimes. Can't control that part, but which is just it's surreal to me as well. But the impact to the operations of the victim definitely drive that timeline, because if they're saying, hey, look, we're losing $100,000 a day, we need this wrapped up in 3 days, then we hit the pedal to the metal to try to get this thing done. It gives us less leverage on the number. Because,
I was going to say that. I guess
one of the strategies. So when we're having this business discussion at the front end of this, we're asking them, like, look, how much can you afford to delay this? Because delay is an effective tactic, and sometimes we'll inject intentional delay into the process. So it really just depends on the circumstances for the victim. If I was going to average it, I'm shooting from the hip. I'm just if I was going to average it, about a business week. 5 to 7 days is kind of what it usually takes. Now, on the back end, when we're doing the crypto component, there sometimes is unforeseen issues there. We try to start the building of that infrastructure of wiring capital and all of that. We try to do that kind of in parallel, because we've seen scenarios where banks refuse to do the wire to a crypto brokerage, for example, based on policy, not based on law, but based on policy. And we have to work around that in some way. And so it adds a business day or two sometimes when you have to, now I have to wire money from this bank to this bank and this bank to the brokerage and that sort of thing. And so those things are also, we try to get in front of those early, like, hey, we think we're going to do a settlement. Let's start figuring out what kind of roadblocks we're going to run to on the financial side early.
Okay. All right. So that's the process. That's where usually the big process. do you work with the clients right now that you have that expertise? Do you work with them to help them prepare for that case, so that, part of the prevention steps?
Yeah, we didn't initially, and then we had a few of our long-term clients that had been, customers of ours for a long time ask us for this. So in the US, we've gotten a lot of coverage in the media. And so our clients are like, hey, I didn't realize you guys were doing this. And so I started getting asked to do things like board briefings for
nice.
C-level executives to tell them why this is important and what to look out for. So last year we developed a little a process that we called R3A, which is a ransomware readiness assessment that goes in and looks at, like, what do you have now and what's it missing? Because what we did learn, and sort of on the job, we learned that your traditional incident response process and business continuity planning it does have some of the items regarding ransomware, but is missing some as well. And so we help companies identify that gap in their plans. And we'll add those as an appendix or an addendum to the existing plans, or write them as a separate plan if they wish. And then we'll even help them with tabletop exercises and things like that to practice. We also have, because we've been asking for the access reports from the bad guys, a pretty good idea of where the bad guys are gaining access. So we share that pretty freely to anybody who wants to listen. And so, yeah, but it's not going to surprise you, Edgar. It's reused credentials, stolen passwords, RDP ports, no MFA on the VPN, that kind of thing. It's very simple. They're not sophisticated in how they're gaining access, right?
So it's funny, a long time ago, I would say about 6-7 years ago, there was a black hat. There was a study done, like a poll done, where it said that, as a CISO or cybersecurity, what worried you the most, right? And the majority were saying defending against 0 days, right? All the movie stuff. And then they compared those answers to the actual way that most attacks are done. And it's exactly what you said. It's all the basics. 0 days, very few, very sophisticated, because there's no need. And so that was a shock.
Unfortunately, most enterprises are still kind of leaving the door open. And there's, like I said, I think that a lot of these are preventable. I think Rob would disagree with my strategy here, but I do think that there's some very simple steps that companies can take, like having a proper password and credential policy and enforcing that policy, in securing the remote access ports. What happened over COVID, we saw a huge influx of new clients, victims over COVID, because people were asking for remote access to systems. IT was standing up that remote access and then forgetting about it.
Yeah, multiple VPNs all over the place. Yeah.
And they just weren't securing it well. So like you said, the attacks are not necessarily sophisticated. Sometimes the bad guys are just logging in. Can't even really call that hacking.
Yeah. Well, and you don't have to. I mean, you don't have to, right? It's just, the role of the attacker is to get you, for the client to pay them.
Right.
Either way they want to do it, they're going to do it. The easiest way possible, more money for the attackers, more profit. Right. Take us, so we understand this. Take us, if you can, through an imaginary setup, tactical edge. I was ransomware, right? Okay. If you don't mind, what usually happens? How do I, what are the stages of, denial, and then, oh my God, the sky's falling, and what happens to a client?
Yeah. That also varies based on the size of the organization, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
A smaller organization is I might be dealing with the owner of the business. Yeah. And those people, it can be very emotional because their business is literally going to shut down. Yeah. We actually, since we last spoke, I got a case of a retailer in the UK, and the owner was like, I think we're just going to have to shut down if we don't solve it. And it's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's a 20, 25, 30-year-old business, and they're going to have to give up.
So really quick, because that happened a couple of years ago. In fact, when we were in Cartagena with all my friends, all the people there in this event, a friend of mine, one of these people with me, they got a call from one of his friends, and it was basically they own a junkyard or whatever you want to call it, right? In multiple locations across the state, and they get ransomware, right? And you're like, a junkyard, what? Right? And they were asking for $25,000, $30,000.
Right.
And as you say, it's a small business, right? They don't have that cash. Right. They don't even know where to start. And they had to consider shutting down. They're like, we can't. That is very sad.
Well, I mean, the good news is, if you can find a silver lining in this, the good news is the price on the window, like is not the price you pay. It's like a car dealership, right? You're not paying what's on the window.
We get to that in a second, because again, that's where you come in, because those are things that a lot of us don't consider. Like they give you this, and this is like, oh crap, I got to pay all that. There's no room to negotiate, and now you're saying, wait, hold my beer. There is a way.
100% of the time you can negotiate. So, and then the other kinds of organizations are very large. They're going to have a cyber insurance company. They're going to have maybe external breach counsel. They'll have a board, and so it's everything's made. All the decisions are made by committee. But even in those larger organizations, we've seen it get very emotional, and like you said, finger pointing, people yelling at each other in the boardroom. And which is why those plans that we talked about earlier are really helpful, because if you've documented these things and practiced them, it makes it a little bit more civil when the time comes. But ultimately, the experience is similar between a small business and a large company, in that people come into work on Monday, and it happens usually on Friday. On
a Friday, exactly.
Yeah, it usually happens on Friday, and I can talk about why that is too. But you come in, systems aren't working, email's not working, you can't access your files in the file server. Most of the time now, these guys are smart enough. Rob talked about this last week, to know how to encrypt the backups. They understand the backup systems, all that stuff. So everything's dysfunctional, and you'll find this text file kind of spread around the network on different machines. When you look at the text file, it'll say, hey, you've been hit by ransomware. It'll announce who the attacker group is. What's our evil, or one of these groups.
Why did they do that? Why do they want to announce? Because they want to make sure that they know,
Yeah,
you're going to be dealing with.
Yeah, they're developing like a brand. Which works in our favor.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But with a common misconception is that note that you get does not usually contain the amount.
Okay.
They don't ask for a number in the note. What they give you is, they'll give you a URL. A web address that's a darknet address, a core address to go to, that is customized to you. It's a site that's victim specific.
Okay.
And they'll say, you need to contact us within a certain period of time. So when you visit that site, what you get is a web page, looks like a normal web page, but it'll have a clock in the corner usually, and that clock, as soon as you go there, the clock starts ticking. Say it says it'll be like 5 days, and they'll have it in hours, right? It's counting down the hours, and it'll say, when this clock reaches 0, we're doubling the price, and we're dumping some of your data on the darknet, right? So it's usually a threat to get you to move quickly.
Okay.
The other thing that's on that site is a FAQ, a frequently asked questions section, which teaches you how to buy the crypto, how to make the payment, and all that stuff. It's actually quite good. They've written it quite well.
Incredible.
Yeah. And then there's another section called a proof of life section, where you can upload up to 2 files that have been encrypted. They will then decrypt them for you to prove that they have the decryption capability. And then the third thing you'll see, and these are usually tabs on the website. They're little tabs. And the last tab will be the chat, and that's where you'll actually interact with the threat actors. And what I will say is, don't try to do this yourself. We've seen some pretty bad negotiations. The bad guys know when they're dealing with someone that isn't experienced in this, and they definitely take advantage. And those don't usually go well. The other thing is, don't go to that site. When you get that note, you need to engage us first, or a similar organization first, because as soon as you go to that site, that clock starts.
And that was going to be my question, because I wrote it here. It's like, so you get a message, you've been ransomware, go to this site, and the first thing you do is you click on that. But let's say that was a fake ransomware. You hadn't been ransomware, and now you click on that site. Now you're definitely ransomware.
Yeah. Don't click on anything. Don't go to the dark web on your own. Don't do that. Use a professional firm to do these things for you, and validate these things, and add that sort of obfuscation layer. And I could look back at over the last 2 years of cases, and I could say that the fees that we charge to do this are 100% ROI. Like you get all of that back in the negotiation, and it's a deal. Trust me, it's worth paying the fee.
And if you followed your advice, you probably don't have, it won't happen to you that your ransomware. So
yeah. If you prepare for it in advance, you can also just avoid it altogether. Exactly.
So in the IRP, now I understand, Ben, what you're saying, that the IRPs, some of them are complete, but they don't have nothing, to include ransomware. This is one of the things. If you should, like, if you see that you've been ransomware, do not click on the link. That should be the first step.
Yeah.
And a lot of IRPs won't have that. So because they never done that. The other thing is, even if you click on that, do not start the conversation. And then contact somebody as quickly as possible.
Well, and I also have a tip on there's a lot of scammers out there as well.
Exactly.
And so if you just Google or search or DuckDuckGo, whatever you're using, if you search for ransomware support or ransomware response or how to decrypt Ragnar Locker or something specific like that, there are scammers who have paid for the AdWords that will show up in the top of your search. God. And here's what they do. There's a bunch of different tricks, but I'll tell you what they do, the scammers. You'll go to their site and they'll say, like, we have software that can decrypt the ransomware. They'll claim to have software that can decrypt the ransomware. They don't. That's not a thing. That's not a real thing. Nobody has that, right? So what they actually do is they go to the ransomware operators, they come up with a price for the decryptors, they mark them up and sell them, then decrypt. They say it's their software, but they're actually just buying the same thing you would buy from the bad guy and adding margin to it. And the reason why I tell you the story is I've seen multiple companies end up paying more than they had to. So first of all, the people doing that negotiation that are marking it up, they don't care about the outcomes.
Right.
So you're not going to get a good price, right? They don't care.
Right.
You do a terrible job and you end up paying a lot more. And when they say they mark it up, sometimes they mark it up 100, 200%, right?
Wow.
And so what I would suggest is if you were hit with ransomware, don't search for your help. Go to a law firm that has a breach practice or go to a cyber insurance company and ask for a referral. Because that's the best way to find somebody. And those organizations will have lists of companies like mine who do this all the time that they trust and they've been vetted and they're not going to scam you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good thing because this weekend I read from big companies, well-known organizations in AV companies, that they have a free decryptor tool.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard this, but I saw it this weekend, and it says like, if you've been in ransomware, don't pay the ransomware. I'm like, good advice. But then the next advice, go here, get the tool, because this will decrypt your ransomware. And I was going to ask you, that cannot be true.
It sounds dubious. It's not impossible if you have enough sample keys for certain companies to backwards engineer those crypto keys. Okay. And there's a company that helped MCSoft, which was what Kaseya partnered with when they got that master key that nobody knows where it came from.
Yeah.
Somebody paid for that. I'm just saying somebody paid for that. Anyway, so it is possible, but the problem is it's only effective for a very short window of time. The likelihood of it actually working is very, very, very low. Exactly. I'm not saying if it's a reputable company, if it's like McAfee, then I would say try it. If it's a company you've never heard of, don't touch it.
Don't even touch it. Okay.
Yeah.
So those are the first steps, right? Or stages. First of denial, then blaming everyone, and then like, okay, we got to do something. And it's like, don't do it. What you're saying is first instinct, don't. It's call your cyber insurance or a cybersecurity law firm and get them to help you out there. Also, in the States, FBI in other locations, right? Call some of those organizations and they can help you. Once the company decides that, okay, we accept when ransomware, and what's next? And that's when they contact you and you come in and then you start with the whole process of
we get into that business discussion component. I will say where we've seen things sort of not go as expected. So for example, you have your business continuity plan. Maybe we have that business discussion and the victim company says, you know what, I think we've got a second set of backups. We're going to just restore from backup. So, cool, do that. But then they'll call us back a couple of days later and say, turns out either the backups didn't work, or it's going to take us a month to restore from these backups.
Or not only that, it's they didn't fix the issue. They don't know how they got hacked in the first place, but they never got to that point of the playbook, and they recover, but they still have the open door, so they're going to get hacked again.
They get hit again. Yep. And I mean, we've had one client get hit 3 times in a very short period of time. It's a large organization, so their attack surface is very large. It's hard for them to enumerate all of this. I get it, but you do have to be on your toes about the response. And then again, your business continuity plan may look good on paper, but when you go to execute it during the incident, you may find that it's going to take a month to restore the backups. Well, you can't afford to be down a month, so we have to pay something, right? And we end up engaging the threat actor.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's almost 100% of the time that you end up paying something.
Yeah, actually, my buddy over at CISA actually asked me this question the other day. Like, because we're hearing like reports all over the map from different vendors. My experience has been 90% of our victims end up paying something.
Okay, but usually not the full price unless you've already done some like, okay, as long as they're engaged. Okay, and I'm interested in the cryptocurrency because a lot of people don't have that expertise.
Sure.
How long does it usually take to do that? And I go, for example, in Colombia, financial institutions in Colombia, because of the history over there with all the money laundering and everything, it's extremely difficult, right, to do this. So how long does it take? How do you work with the banks? That is something that you definitely offer help with as part of your services.
We do. So it again, I hate to give you these vague answers, but it varies based on where you're located. So like Europe, for example, is very difficult. Yeah. They put limits on the wire transfers, on the size of the wire transfers, things like that, on a daily limit, for example. Okay. So that could string it out. So it depends on where you're domiciled, but it also depends on your bank's policy. So some of the banks will say like, look, we don't wire money into brokerages. That's not a thing we do. By the way, that policy isn't necessarily specific to ransomware. Having spoken to a bunch of the leadership in the US around anti-money laundering and things like this, they've indicated that the biggest concern the banks have is liquidity, because when the capital goes into crypto, it's no longer in the banking system, right? And that they don't like that. You can imagine.
Yeah, the whole business is based on that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it depends on the banking system and where you're based primarily. The hardest part is getting the money from the bank into the crypto infrastructure. Yeah. Once you get in the crypto infrastructure, it's gone. It's instantaneous. Easy. Like you can move stuff around pretty quick. Yeah. So it's the hardest part is just navigating the banking system.
Okay. The negotiation part, that's very interesting. So you mentioned last week that you don't have eye contact, so that part of the psychological aspect, it's no longer there. Most probably, do you ever get on the phone, or is all chat?
It's all chat. Yeah, it's all chat.
So it's even worse.
Some groups will use anonymous email accounts, and it's over email, but most of the time it's on that dark web chat component. I will say that we do use some of the traditional negotiation tools like tactical empathy and things like that, where we're identifying with who we're talking to as a person in the situation they're in. Keep in mind that the larger threat actor groups, like the ones you hear about on the news, like REvil and those guys, the group itself is very sophisticated. The first person you talk to is a junior level person. They have a quota, and they have a maximum discount they can give you before they need authority. And then they have to go to their manager, who gives them authority to give you a bigger discount. It's an organization. And so you put yourself in the position of the person you're talking to. I like to say that, look, these guys are pretending that they're business people. Pretend with them, and the process will go better. There's no need to tell them they're bad guys. There's no need to get antagonistic or angry. It doesn't do any good. So you just stick to the facts. And that's the other thing is I like to say, we always try to negotiate to the best of our ability in good faith. And that means we don't lie. And actually, a lot of times you can't, because the threat actors have taken a copy of your financials. So you can't lie to them about how much money you have. They know how much money you have. So you have to use other tools to get the number down. Yeah.
So do you think that in the future we're going to see like a director of ransomware or someone that, within organization? You hope not, because but actually you hope that it does, because that means that you have a more business links, but you see that happening in the future, like a chief ransomware officer?
No, I don't think so. I think it's all going to fall into the current organizational structure. Now, I think organizations should have someone sort of appointed as the ransomware response lead that owns that from the business side. And that person would be not necessarily, they don't have to be necessarily technical. They need to be, facilitating the communications between the technical teams and the finance teams and things like that. There needs to be somebody who knows that they're on call to be the quarterback, if you will, of that scenario in every company.
Do you see companies already taking proactive steps? If we identify that the communications with the banks is the sticky point, do you see companies already starting that conversation with their banks just in case?
Yeah, and actually some of our larger multinational clients have holdings in Bitcoin just in case. So they've already got it into the crypto infrastructure. Banking stuff is taken care of so that when the time comes, they can pull the trigger quickly.
Wow.
So yeah, some companies are being proactive about it. They're also being proactive about the planning. Like I said, they've been asked on a pretty regular cadence to do these board briefings for pretty large, very, very large, well-known companies to prepare their executive teams for this type of incident.
Wow, this is incredible. Well, Kurtis, I think we run out of time here because I want to leave some time to discuss live with the attendees. But wow, this this is incredible.
My pleasure. And if I can help, advice is free, Edgar. So if you think I can help your constituents, I'm happy to do that free of charge. Do a talk.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, that's free. I'm also a big believer in karma. So if I can give back a little bit, I like to do that.
Do you, as part of with Groupsense, do you offer workshops on how to prepare and things like that?
Not necessarily workshops, but you can engage us to come in and help you develop the playbooks, develop the incident response addendums
specific to ransomware.
Yeah, you can engage our team to do that.
Yeah. Kurtis, wow, this is fantastic. I mean, I never seen this before. Just really quick to summarize really quick. So you have stages: education, then you become a liaison, then help with the cryptocurrency for the payment stuff, then the actual payment where you confirm and ask for playbooks, and then I mean, those are basically.
The only thing I would say is put in the middle the compliance checks.
The compliance, review international laws to make sure that you're not breaking, because that's the worst thing is you're already ransomware and now you're also going to be breaking the law. Yeah, you don't want to do that. And one of the big things is focus on your IRP, make sure it has a section on ransomware. But if it doesn't, just make sure that everyone knows to not click on that stupid link.
Yeah, don't go there.
Don't go there. Exactly. And contact you guys at Groupsense, or contact your cyber insurance or a law firm that specializes in cybersecurity. Kurtis, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, buddy. This is
my pleasure. I'm
fantastic, man.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. All right. Bueno, caballero, muy madre.
Sí.
¿Cómo lo viste?
No, pues imagínate. O sea, volverlo a escuchar ya vuelve uno y como que...
Wow.
Sí. Y sigue impresionado con el tema, pues, de todo lo que, y como decía yo, es lo que nos pudo contar, exactamente, Carolina. Así quedamos nosotros cuando lo escuchamos las dos veces. La primera vez,
yo desde el lunes yo desde el lunes
pero la segunda vez...
No, interesante lo que dijo, que 100% del tiempo puede negociar. Eso, como lo que decíamos tú y yo, nosotros no sabíamos que se podía negociar. Para mí eso fue increíble. Y el 90% de los casos terminan pagando.
Sí, mira lo que dice Carolina, que sí, por favor, no seas tan malo y que si le repasas las recomendaciones. Yo creo que vale la pena, sí, esos 4 puntos que le pusiste al final.
Bueno, sí. Y no eran bueno, las recomendaciones.
O sea,
Sí.
como el framework por el que ellos pasan. Primero
Ok,
educar,
el
tener
framework,
en
sí.
cuenta. Sí.
Entonces la educación, que es básicamente que es donde viene gente como Groupsense. De nuevo, Groupsense, imagínate que tienen, lo pueden contactar y ellos, como dijo Kurtis, ellos hablan muchos idiomas. Inclusive las personas encargadas de ventas en Latinoamérica o de ventas son personas de Latinoamérica. Entonces ellos hablan español, así que si los pueden contactar a la página de ellos de Groupsense y tienen acceso. Lo que ellos dijeron, educación, donde le dicen al cliente todas las opciones que hay en la mesa, las opciones que los clientes tienen cuando están en el tema de ransomware, para que el cliente entonces es el que tome la decisión, ¿sí? Pero desde un punto ya de educado, ¿no? De conocimiento. Luego viene, una vez que decidan que van a ir a negociar y van a pagar el ransomware, ahí donde entra alguien como Groupsense, como Kurtis, que es el contacto, el enlace, como tú dijiste, de comunicación entre el cliente y los atacantes, ¿no? El grupo coso. Les ayudan entonces con el tema de financiero para listar el tema del pago con cryptocurrency, con las criptomonedas, y al mismo tiempo están revisando el tema de las regulaciones a nivel local, por si, como él dijo, si el grupo de ransomware es un grupo que está localizado en Irán,
No hay nada que hacer.
nada que hacer.
Ahí compartí el artículo que escribió. Esa es una buena historia, la verdad es que me pareció genial.
Todo bueno.
Lo que tú me contaste, que lo escribió a raíz de toda esta
De esta charla.
conversación.
Exacto.
Exactamente, y está es del 24, es decir, lo escribió ayer.
Ayer.
Lo escribió ayer.
Es que lo escribió apenas terminamos la charla, él fue y lo escribió.
Y ahí deja entrever que muchos me preguntan, pero yo no me había sentado como a escribir esto de verdad que es, y que vale la pena leérselo.
Leérselo,
¿sí?
sí.
Está muy chévere, también es un resumen como de algunas
Sí,
cosas que resalta acá y
sí, no, muy
para
bueno.
todos.
Entonces las recomendaciones, lo que él siempre decía, el tema del Incident Response Plan, tiene que sí o sí tener, lo que habíamos dicho anteriormente, tiene que tener una sección, un addendum específico para ransomware. No es suficiente que digas que tenemos para malware. Ya nos dimos cuenta que malware, ransomware.
Desde la conversación anterior, inclusive que fue una de las preguntas como que pues yo sigo y seguiré investigando, pues porque me lleva siempre a la misma pregunta que te decía antes y es, cuando venga algo peor que el ransomware, ¿qué va a pasar? Entonces, esta super especialización que vamos a tener que empezar a tener en nuestros procedimientos. Es decir, sí es claro que hay que tener escrito nuestro playbook para qué vamos a hacer con respecto al ransomware. Eso no es discutible. Eso no lo voy a discutir con nadie. Es necesario tener un playbook en el caso exclusivo de ransomware, sí, por las implicaciones que tiene. Más como lo decía Kurtis, que decía, es que no es lo mismo que me ataquen una infraestructura normal a que me ataquen una infraestructura crítica.
Exacto.
Y hoy ya estamos viendo eso, o como lo dicen en el artículo, cuando atacan las cosas como las de la salud, entonces la cosa no es tan sencilla.
Exacto. ¿Sí? Exacto, no es sencilla. Y aquí hay una pregunta, que si las negociaciones son hechas vía chat, eso es lo que él dijo, que sí, que sí se hace vía chat, todas las negociaciones, inclusive hasta por email, y le pregunté, ¿no? Si alguna vez lo hacen por teléfono, dijo que no, todo es por escrito. Algún draft sugerido de un Incident Response Plan. Como dijo Kurtis, ellos, contáctenos a ellos, ellos tienen eso. Yo sé que si entran a cisa.gov,
en el CISA o en el NIS están los dos.
Pero en el cisa.gov, porque yo lo vi, yo lo bajé, y inclusive creé uno de esos específicos de ransomware para un cliente basado en los procesos de CISA.
De hecho, un documento en donde están las 6 guías, como la de CISA, está la del NIS específica para tratamiento de ransomware solamente.
Exacto.
Ahí están
Y está el de Series. No, perfecto. O sea, hay muchas cosas, pero sí tenemos que hacerlo. Y lo que él dijo fue muy importante y quiero que le recalque a todos y salió también la semana pasada. Los
no lo haga
ataques,
por su cuenta.
no, uno no lo haga por su cuenta, no, pero el tema de prevenir, de prevención,
Eso.
él dijo que sí se puede prevenir. De nuevo, no es fácil la prevención, porque todos decimos, el tema de los básicos, el higiene básico. ¿Qué es lo que él dijo? Tener una buena política de proceso de contraseñas y que apliquen multi-factor authentication. Si hacen esas dos, él dijo, la mayoría de esos ataques no existen. Inclusive en el blog que tú compartiste, él da esos consejos, ¿sí? De cosas específicas, básicas que se pueden hacer. Pero sí, el tema de concientización. Me gustó mucho lo que él dijo una vez que reciban el letrerito que han sido un ransomware y que hagan un clic aquí, que le enseñen a todo el mundo que no hagan clic en nada. Porque como él dijo, apenas hacen el clic y entran a la página esa, el relojito comienza a rodar y ahí donde viene el tema donde ellos te agarran y te tienen amarrado porque se agota el tiempo y está ahogando con el tema de psicológica de
Sí,
la
claro, con la presión
desesperación.
psicológica. También lo otro importante que me llamó mucho la atención es, como me decía un amigo aquí que me estaba escribiendo en privado, me decía, el trading que hacen, ¿no? De
El trading
negociar todo eso.
es
Bueno,
impresionante.
listo, te pedí 70, bueno, pero no son 70, entonces negociemos, mira, qué tal, no sé qué,
Pero,
tenemos disposición.
y
O
me gusta
sea,
que él como dice que utiliza las tecnologías las tácticas de empatía, ¿no?
sí, sí,
Aunque sea
esa es la otra cosa, ¿no? Sí.
por el chat. Es
Sí.
muy interesante.
Sí.
Muy, pero muy
Y yo me
interesante.
imagino que exacto, pues al no saber el detalle, puedo suponer que utilizará las técnicas también de elogio para poder decir, oye, qué interesante todo lo que, y así como dar esa apertura para que pueda venir ese proceso de negociación. O sea,
Algo que me gustó mucho, bueno, me gustó mucho la conversación con Curtis, que yo no sabía, que ellos te entregan el playbook. Como un
exacto.
negociador, tú le pides a ellos, bueno, dígame, carajo, ¿cómo carajo entraron
Que
ustedes a
aquí
mi
hay una
red?
pregunta que hicieron de eso. Entonces, para el que Luis, que hizo la pregunta, generalmente para eso entregan el playbook en la mayoría de los casos de qué fue lo que pasó. ¿Sí?
Exacto. Y entonces la idea es que la empresa víctima utilice esa información para,
Pues para mejorar,
para
obviamente.
mejorar y parar ese huequito que hay por ahí, ¿no? Y darse cuenta cómo va. Eh, Debería escribir un libro. En esas estamos, pero con el tema del tiempo
No,
siempre.
no, o sea, exacto, nosotros estamos en eso, hemos ido recopilando, sí, no sé si ustedes han visto los resúmenes que después de algunas charlas yo he publicado, pues porque la
Sí.
idea es esa, claramente en algún momento, ojalá tengamos
Ojalá.
más tiempo para poderlo sacar, pero sí,
Exacto, exacto. Pero no, buena la idea, Daniel, muchas gracias.
gracias.
Y Luis Torres dice, él no creo que den la historia completa en el playbook, pero sirve.
No, no,
No, acuérdate lo que dijo Curtis, que parte de la negociación antes del pago es eso, recibir esa
lo otro.
información y todo eso. Claro,
No, yo me
también,
imagino que sí tiene sentido, pues porque es que no es solo negociar para que me devuelva la información, sino también para que me diga.
ujú, ¿cómo lo
Claro
hicieron?
que Curtis sí deja claro, y sí en el artículo también, por eso me gusta el título, que antes de mirar afuera, mire adentro,
Ujú,
porque deja claro que muchos de estos problemas no son vainas súper elaboradas hechas por extraterrestres, sino que son las típicas fallas de tener contraseña 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
ujú,
O sea, queda claro que el hombre tiene claro que su trabajo es algo fácil porque nosotros mismos se la
lo
pusimos
hacemos
fácil al
fácil.
adversario, ¿no?
Y,
Sí.
y el tema importante y aquí que siempre hemos escuchado y hemos leído, ¿no? Que esta gente son organizaciones y lo que se comentó la semana pasada, que son empresas con organizaciones que tienen metas financieras y todo eso, que inclusive Elizabeth Wharton dijo que ella veía reuniones semanales con los gerentes de estas organizaciones maliciosas o lo que sea, eh, intercambiando diapositivas de PowerPoint, ¿no? mira lo que hicimos aquí, nosotros atacamos
Sí.
el sector salud por acá
Pero es que para un comentario que hubo acá, efectivamente, yo creo que fue de Carolina. Sí, efectivo, yo estoy de acuerdo. Lo que está diciendo Edgar es ratificar lo que estamos hablando. Los criminales, perdón, fue Luis, los criminales están más organizados que las empresas. Acabas de decirlo.
claro,
Seguramente que ellos tienen sus juntas y dicen, oiga, mire, en el sector salud nosotros hicimos esto, en el sector industrial nosotros hicimos esto, y nosotros aquí los hizo peleando por 3 pelos de ego,
porque no
por
queremos,
por
exacto.
contarnos entre uno y otro cuáles son las estrategias para proteger
Y
mejor
eso
o
siempre
queriendo
se ha
ocultar la
dicho.
información. Entonces,
Andrés, cuando hicimos el primer Tactical Edge en Colombia hace 5 o 6 años y tuvimos a Wendy Nather como invitada especial en el taller para CISOs después del evento, ella que dijo, comunicación, como CISOs deben hacer los CISOs locales, armar su comunidad de CISOs. ¿Qué es lo que estamos haciendo tú con la
sí.
comunidad de CISOs? Estamos haciendo con Tactical Edge. El tema de la conversación, juntémonos, hablémonos, conversemos con otros, mira lo que me sucedió,
Y sobre
compartir
todo
esa
porque
información.
a mí me dejó plasmado, o sea, hay un pensamiento que me dejó un CISO, bueno, yo no creo que se puede, esta es una evaluación personal, y hago comillas para mi evaluación personal.
Ajá.
Yo no creo que pueda llamarse CISO cuando me dije, es que en una conversación nosotros no resolvemos nada. Yo le dije, pues de las conversaciones surgen todas las acciones, mi querido amigo, y así es como funciona el cerebro.
Ujú,
El cerebro necesita tener una conversación para poder actuar.
ujú.
Porque yo me dijo, no, es que ¿para qué se reúnen los CISOs si ahí no pasa nada? O sea, el CISO solo puede actuar y yo, bueno, o sea, pues son visiones, ¿sí? Son visiones.
Exacto.
Sí.
Dice Carlos Rodríguez, hoy en día la negociación ya no es solo para la recuperación de la información, sino también para otras variantes como evitar su divulgación.
Pero
100%.
sí, pero mira qué curioso, porque Carlos pone un punto que estoy haciéndole monitoreo y rastreo y creo que ya pronto voy a poder escribir al respecto de eso y es la táctica del adversario es sí te secuestro los datos, pero yo no sé si ustedes se han fijado que detrás de todos los secuestros, más allá de la negociación o no, enseguida viene la divulgación de la brecha de datos.
Exacto.
Entonces, esto para decir, evitar la divulgación pareciese ser que no fuese tan efectivo a la hora de la verdad.
Exacto. Exacto. Pero muy
Ah, qué buena,
interesante.
gracias Alberto, sí, muy buena. El malware más peligroso es el Lego, total.
Excelente. Me
Muy
gusta esa
buenísimo.
es una camisa. Esa es
Sí,
una camisa y el malware es más peligroso que el ego. En países como Colombia, los que el pago de rescate
en
se
países como
considera un
Colombia,
delito.
en todos lados.
En todos lados. Y eso es lo que dijo Curtis. Tiene que revisar específicamente con su área, el área pues, local, qué permiten, qué no permiten. De nuevo, lo que dijimos, en Estados Unidos no puede negociar, no puede enviar dinero a nadie en Irán. ¿Sí? Entonces, si este grupo que te hackeó es iraní, se jodieron. O
No,
sea,
y
se
para
jodieron ambos.
responderle y enlazarlo y terminar con esta para Luis, me quedé con la inquietud de cómo manejan en Colombia las transacciones con criptos. Ahorita, por ejemplo, el Banco de la República y la Super están haciendo ya los primeros unboxing para poderle dar trámite, precisamente porque es que la tendencia global es hacer rastreable el dinero digital, que eso es una tendencia no de Colombia. Colombia se está sumando al esfuerzo internacional de empezar a hacerle rastreo a la moneda.
Exacto, exacto. Es interesante, o sea,
Sí,
esto abre muchas preguntas y todo eso,
mucho.
pero de nuevo, a mí me pareció espectacular saber qué sucede después de un ransomware o durante un
Sí.
ransomware. Ya nos dimos cuenta lo que sucede, ¿no? Las empresas que están preparadas pueden responder
¿Pueden responder?
de una
Bueno,
manera más fácil. Lo que dijo Curtis, que un promedio de 5 a 7 días para que todo este proceso termine, desde que llegó la noticia que te estén en ransomware hasta cuando ya te entregaron el playbook y la llavecita y todo funciona. Entre 5 a 7 días y dice que en algunas veces mucho menos que eso. Pero eso asumiendo que están preparados pues que tienen que pagar, ¿no? Y de nuevo, no lo hagan. Aquí yo creo que uno de los mensajes más claros de Curtis es no hagan esto ustedes solos, porque lo van a hacer peor
peor.
y les va a doler mucho más que lo que ya les está doliendo. Pero bueno, a todos de verdad muchas gracias. Espero que haya sido bueno, el programa estará disponible en el canal de YouTube esta misma noche. Entonces, bendiciones a todos. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Andrés.
Cuídense mucho. Diana, gracias por tu comentario y seguiremos trabajando pues, para que esas cosas pasen.
Excelente. Bueno, hasta luego todo. Oigan, regístrense para el CISO Latin Summit, ¿no?
CISO Latin Summit.
TacticalEdge.co. Ya no hay cupos a nivel presencial, pero estamos creando la lista de espera. Pero sí hay cupos para nivel virtual. TacticalEdge.co.
Va a estar muy bueno. Va a estar
Nos vemos
muy
en Santa Marta, ¿sí o no, Andrés?
Yo no, así es.
Chaito a todos.